The Scepter's Border. My name is Daniel Vallis, and welcome to our channel. 1 Peter 5:8. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. We are in some very dark days right now, approaching a very occult time of the year too as well. We know the spiritual attacks are increasing. We see other examples too as well. We can tell the enemy is very busy at this time. And so now, most importantly, when we're in the enemy's time, and days that celebrate their cause, we most especially need to be sober. We need to especially be vigilant and on guard, because the enemy is going to seek to devour and destroy our testimony at this time. And he is looking to do this, and we are seeing so many examples of this right now during this day. This is very real. We must be sober, which means we need to be serious-minded. We must take this very seriously. The enemy is seeking to destroy our testimony, our hope, our faith right now at this time, and we see examples around us. Be sober, be vigilant. And this is why we rehearse the way God wants us to go in life, how he wants our thinking to go, how he wants our passions to go, how he wants our heart to go, how he wants us to go forward in our life according to scriptural principles. And the more that we rehearse what Christ wants us to do every day in life and the way he wants us to go, the more we can be vigilant about going the right way. And Satan is going to seek to devour our testimony and our faith at this time. He's going to use pride to bring people into condemnation. And when Satan can get us off track, going in a way we should not be going, he can quickly rack up a whole laundry list as the accuser of the brethren to bring against us, to bring us into condemnation. He is seeking to devour us at this time, so we must be on guard that we are thinking and speaking and acting, and everything we are doing is true and honest and just and pure and lovely and of good report, virtuous and praiseworthy. And the more we rehearse what Scripture wants us to give our mind to, what God wants us to give our heart to, our passions, our strength, the more we rehearse that, the more we are on guard, and the more the Holy Spirit can remind us when Satan does tempt us. So this is why we definitely need to rehearse all this and keep it on mind. Write it out on paper. Memorize these verses. They are a guard for us to keep us walking in the right way, especially when we know we're at a time where the enemy is very busy. And we know attacks are going on right now. Be sober, be focused, be serious, know and expect the enemy to be busy and to attack from different avenues too as well. We must be vigilant and be on the lookout. Guard ourselves, equip ourselves, and go the right way. Because our adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, he does walk about, seeking whom he may devour. We are at a very incredible time, prophetic-wise, but also on the calendar, a very occult and dark time too as well, celebrating and observing the days of the dead, a very occult and pagan time that Christians should have nothing to do with. We find ourselves on a momentous time right now at the final day of the actual commemorative dates, but we are still in the time frame and the days of Noah and Lot in the culture and mentality. But we also see ourselves approaching some significant biblical warnings too as well, of Christ's warning that when they make the calls for peace and safety, that sudden destruction is coming, and we need to be listening for that cue card. And we heard it a year ago, and we know the Bible often uses the examples of a year cycle. And so we must take this very soberly and very seriously, that we are coming up right at this very dark time, right at the end of the days of Noah and Lot, chronologically, but also in the mentality. When we see all this coming together, it's not by accident. And we can see just by the activity around us that the enemy activity, the occult activity, the spiritual wickedness has really ramped up in just the past few days too as well. We know we are at a time when we must be very vigilant. Today also marked the time when Mercury was going past the sun and was no longer going to be above the horizon at sunrise. By this celestial sign, the messenger is now off the scene. The warning has gone out, prepare ye the way. And it was just a few days ago that Jupiter and Mercury, the messenger, were well seen in the morning sky next to each other. Definitely reminding us of the SHILOH prophecy that he is coming to gather his people. He is coming again. And just like John the Baptist, the messenger was warning, prepare ye the way, make your path straight. Now is the time when we need to examine the way we are going and make sure that we are bringing forth the fruits in our lives that he expects. But this was a very powerful picture that was started just a few days ago, and just today on the 27th, 28th, Mercury is going off the scene. The messenger is going off the scene. John the Baptist, the messenger. And the enemy knows the typology and the celestial signs that are going on right now. At Trafalgar Square again, on October 28th, which is going on right now, they are doing 2 living art exhibitions at the Trafalgar Square. Yes, in that square, and they're reenacting a painting of the beheading of John the Baptist. Yes, of all the times to do a freak show, they're doing one about the beheading of John the Baptist at Trafalgar Square. Because they know exactly what time it is. The enemy knows what time it is. He's mocking how Christians don't even know what time it is. They aren't paying attention to the signs. And the enemy is getting ready for the triumphal entry of their son of perdition, and they're mocking how the church is so asleep and not even listening to the messages. Prepare ye the way. Behold, the bridegroom cometh. Go ye out to meet him. We should be rising up. We should be trimming our lamps and casting off the works of darkness, especially at this dark time of the year, and putting on the armor of light. Are we? But then in addition to that, the enemy knows we're at the rehearsal of the peace and safety. They know this warning is in effect. And just today, on the United Nations Twitter account, their messenger of peace, hello, John the Baptist, the messenger. Yes, today they sent out their messenger of peace on their Twitter account talking about peace and security. And he said that exact phrase twice. Peace and security. Their messenger. They're sending out their messengers. They know exactly what time it is. And that we are on the threshold of sudden destruction coming in connection with the warning calls of peace and safety. And their messenger promoted this video emphasizing their key goals to transform the world, namely peace at this time, using the same Noah's Ark dove. Again, they know we're in the days of Noah and Lot. They know the calls for peace and safety have gone out. They know sudden destruction is coming. They know it's coming like a flood the day that the church is entering into the ark. They know exactly what time it is. This week, right now, we are in the middle of the UN Disarmament Week. A whole week devoted to peace and security. Right at this time. And it's going from October 24th to October 30th. And all this is coming together right now in sync with the celestial signs. The celestial messenger going off the scene, referencing the biblical pattern of John the Baptist. The enemy is copycatting and mocking it, and at the same time sending out their messenger to announce peace and security at this time that they know we're coming full circle to peace and safety warnings, and that sudden destruction is about to come. These next few days are very, very important. If you haven't yet, definitely download our Peace and Safety Announce, where we cover the warnings that went out a year ago. And it should sober us up that we're coming full circle a year later, and the enemy knows exactly that a countdown is in play, and they are mocking that the church is not heeding the messengers. Definitely download the handout, study it. We also have a booklet, fold-over version of it too as well, that's a little bit easier to read. The enemy knows the warning call for peace and safety is a warning given to the church that they should be listening to. This went out a year ago. What has the church been doing? Have we been rising up? Have we been casting off the works of darkness? Have we been putting on the armor of light? Have we been doing anything in light of eternity? And that our Redeemer is about to return. And that sudden destruction is about to come on the world. Are we living in light of what we're being shown? And the enemy knows, for the most part, the church is not listening. The church is asleep. And they know that sudden destruction is about to come. And this is why we are told to watch, so we can make ourselves ready, so we can prepare ourselves. We are quickly running out of time. When we zoom out a little bit, we can see that we're at a prophetic time of a transition between Judah and the woman, and between these two signs, the Shiloh gathering sign and the woman Virgo Revelation 12 sign, which rehearses the pregnancy cycle. And definitely download our Shiloh booklet, and then also our new booklet on the Revelation 12 Shiloh sign, which focuses on the return of the king. Right now we are expecting the gathering of Shiloh's people of the Lion of the tribe of Judah. This two-part prophecy is right here, and we're at a threshold almost between the two. And in our recent videos over the past 2 weeks, we've been talking about and trying to explain, as time permitted, the concept of dividing the constellations by 30 degrees. But we were talking about how the Babylonians, especially the Chaldeans, specifically used Jupiter's very precise clockwork motion of the retrograde because it took 12 years to go around the loop, and so it was very precise and equally divided it up into 12 segments. They used that to divide the constellations along the ecliptic. And so we've been emphasizing that of the two borders that we've been looking at, we know that Jupiter is right now at the start of the woman stars, Virgo stars, from the Chaldean perspective. But we've mentioned and emphasized that was just an assumed border. We had nothing to concretely say, yes, that is the final border. It was just an assumed border. But now that we have gotten concrete evidence and that has academic and technical weight behind it, we know the factual and demonstrable border would be defined by the retrograde loops. And this is what we have on our Finding Judah's border, which goes into the technical aspects. And so that's why I always refer and ask you to download it and study it, because it does get a little more technical. But we've been pointing out that this is a demonstrable way that they definitely divided the constellations along the ecliptic. And you can find a variety of academic sources that this is the way they did it. Now, I updated the event study calendar. I had forgotten to update it when I updated the Finding Judah's border as we've been going along. So I just recently updated that with the more academic border at November 11th. But right now, Jupiter is inside the Chaldean Virgo stars, but it's still within the Judah section. And this is what we're going to look at today and hopefully try to explain it a little better and help you understand it. That Jupiter can be within the stars of Virgo, even from the Chaldean perspective, but still be in the Judah section because of the way they divided it. And we also have to remember that the constellations along the ecliptic do not neatly fit into these equal divisions either. Particularly Virgo and Leo and Aquarius. There are some pretty large constellations. No matter how you shift the 30 degrees, you are always going to have some overhang. And so, for example, Virgo at some times can span over 3 different divisions. And so one is going to be allocated to Virgo, but that also means some stars of Virgo may be hanging over into another section division that's allocated to another constellation, for example, Judah. And so we have to keep this in mind that the sectioning and divisioning is what is seen as the division for that constellation name, for example, the woman or Judah. So it's not necessarily by the stars, it's by the division and the section. And the section will fall around the stars, but you will have some overhang in a lot of instances. And we looked at a few examples, and you could just even search on Google, Babylonians using Jupiter to define the constellations. You'll find a whole variety of academic sources on it. And it's important that the documentation for how they did this goes way back to early Babylon, even too, as well. And specifically, it's recorded on archaeological evidence known as the Enuma Elish tablets, or the tablets of creation. They're paganized, distorted version of creation, but the tablets of creation is what they're typically colloquially known as. And so there's hard academic evidence that this is the technical way they did it for a long time, going back to the early days of when they recorded their astronomical observations, which would include going back to the time of Abraham too as well, which when he left Ur of the Chaldees, he was leaving with this understanding. And then we also talked historically about how the Babylonian records were handed over to the Greeks at the time of Alexander the Great, which went all the way back to the founding of Babylon. So we have strong academic facts and evidence that this is the way they did it. Took us a while to find it, but now we have it. And a variety of astronomy sources will tell you that they used the retrograde motion to define 10 degrees of arc in the sky along the ecliptic. And that is what they used to help define and measure out the different divisions. So based on the archaeological evidence and the academic study on the subject, we know very strongly that this is the best understanding of the border division. And so this is how we're approaching the division of what should be viewed as Judah and the division that should be viewed as the woman. And so when we keep in mind the prophecy that the scepter shall not depart from Judah nor from between the feet, we take that in concept of how they divided the constellations too. And the primary condition in that prophecy is that the scepter will not depart Judah. And so as long as the scepter is in what the Babylonians would have defined as the Judah section, and both of the feet of the lion fall within that section too as well, and it's even highlighted by the circle retrograde, we know that's the Judah section. And so we will watch it as long as the scepter is in what they would have defined and divided as Judah. And just like the wise men, we have been learning so much. This has been an incredible journey, how the Lord has brought a lot of information to our attention and we've studied. But we've also seen a lot of the tapestry of individuals as we've been along this journey. And it reminds me so much of the wise men. And we've talked about this before, but we must always keep this in mind. We will never have the full picture. He is seeing who is going to act wisely, who is going to act on faith in what they do know. The wise men got up and went out on a journey, not even knowing where the king was. They knew a direction they needed to be heading, so they got on their camel and they started going. And it wasn't till most of their journey was done, and they had gone quite a long way, and they had many disappointments too. It wasn't until months later that they saw and got additional confirmation from the Lord's leading. And so we always have to keep this in mind too as well. We should not be surprised that the Lord keeps giving more and more information as we keep going forward. Even very important information, holding it for the very last moment. Because He's looking for who will go forward in faith on what they do know. There's a lot we don't know, but there's a lot that we do know. And just like Abraham, he was called to go out not even knowing where he was going. And Noah, and the wise men, and we are called to follow their example, to go forward in faith on what we do know. And as we go forward in faith, the Lord gives us more wisdom and more light on the path as we continue to go forward. Hebrews 9:28. So Christ was once offered to bear the sins of many, and unto them that look for Him shall He appear the second time without sin unto salvation. We are watching, we are looking for Him the second time. And to have the best understanding of when He will be coming the second time to pick up His purchased possession that He paid for the first time, in order to understand the second time, we have to understand the first time. And so this is the main reason why we're looking at how did the wise men see this? What did they see the first time? What was their perspective? What was the astronomical understanding and perspective and approach that they had when looking at this prophecy? What was Daniel's perspective? What was Abraham's perspective? Or Judah's and Jacob's? What was their perspective that led to the fulfillment and the understanding of the first time? What did the wise men know that enabled them to go forward the first time? And the more we have an understanding of what happened the first time, of that sign, that the Bible tells us only a few people saw, and only a few people looked for. So that should catch our attention too. Not many people are going to go through the trouble to look for this particular sign. But when we understand it and search it out as a treasure hunt, God will give so much wisdom. Blessed is he that hungereth and thirsteth after righteousness, for he shall be filled. So many times as Christians we miss so many blessings in our life because we aren't hungry for it at all. We don't have an appetite for it. But when we have an appetite for searching out Scripture and knowing the depth of Scripture and learning about the tapestry of redemption and learning what happened the first time and how that affects our understanding of the second time, when we are hungry, we will be filled. And so this is why we need to keep going forward. And as we keep going forward, we keep getting filled and given more wisdom and more light. When we think of the wise men and how few people actually looked for the scepter star of the Messiah's first coming. They had about 400 years of prophetic warning that this is how Christ was coming, and Daniel prophesied to the day that it was going to happen. And so the world had hundreds of years of warning, but the Bible records that only a handful of people actually looked for this particular very important sign. But the Bible also records that they were very blessed. And God led them and gave them direction and brought them right to the door. And they enjoyed a special blessing that nobody else enjoyed because they went forward in faith. And God led them along the path as they went forward. And they kept going forward in spite of the disappointments and the frustrations. They kept going forward on what they did know. And they were rewarded and blessed accordingly. And so we keep going forward. We keep looking for Him, knowing He will appear the second time. And so while we are watching, even though we won't know the day or the hour, we will watch, and we are told to watch. And we know that there is a blessing for the servants who do watch and live in light of His return. The wise men came to Jerusalem, and they knew a lot. They were very smart people. But they did not know one very important thing. And their question when they got to Jerusalem was, where is He that is born King of the Jews? And this should keep our expectations in check too as well. They knew so much astronomical data and stuff that I'd never be able to grasp. But that was an important thing that they did not know. And God did not bring it to their attention until they traveled all the way to Jerusalem. And there's going to be common knowledge things that we might not know until it's brought to our attention. Until God directs our paths across it. In His perfect timing. So we will keep going forward in faith asking the same question. Where is He? Where is He? Now going back to the borders and how they divided the constellations into different sections. They did so by measuring the length of the retrograde movement, the loop that Jupiter does in the heavens. And that perfectly measured out 10 degrees of arc on the celestial circle. And then they just measured out 10 more degrees and 10 more degrees. And that gave them 30 degrees for each section. And they used the clockwork motion of Jupiter to give them this measurement. And so when we look at just the region of the sky here in 2016, the region of what we know as Leo and Virgo and Libra. In late 2014, Jupiter had its retrograde right between Cancer and Leo, so that would have defined 10 degrees. And so we're going to take the way that the scepter, Jupiter, would divide the heavens. We're going to see how it has done so, and that will show us how we should be viewing the different sections of the constellations. So 10 degrees right there in Cancer, and then 10 more degrees and 10 more degrees, that would make the 30 degrees of that section. But then our attention was definitely drawn to the retrograde loop around the hind leg of Leo, one of the hind legs, and particularly one that we're more familiar with in our modern constructs, and it does happen to be the more visible of the two legs too as well. But it definitely caught our attention how Jupiter's path, the scepter's path, perfectly circled it, very perfectly. And so that would have defined 10 degrees and given us the understanding of 30 degrees arc for that section, which then the retrograde that starts in Virgo would start the next 30 degrees. And then the retrograde in Libra would start the next 30 degrees. And so using the clockwork precision of the scepter divides out the borders of the constellations. And so we can see that Judah, the section defined by the scepter, would fall in the area that we've been looking at. And we see that extends for several more days until it reaches the edge of the retrograde loop that's happening in Virgo. And we'll be reaching that point around November 11-ish. But this is the Judah section. This is the Judah division. So even though the scepter and Jupiter may be traveling right now in the beginning stars of Virgo, even from a Chaldean perspective, it is still in the Judah section as defined by that very same scepter. It's clockwork precision. And it should catch our attention that the hind part of what we understand as the lion, both of the legs, the hind rear legs, are in this section. And this is a section we are anticipating dealing with the gathering of the Shiloh prophecy too as well. So that even more reinforces that yes, the division is correct too as well, because it is dealing with the hind portion of the prophecy itself too as well. But then we see the retrograde with Virgo perfectly landing in the pregnancy spot. And remember, because of the clockwork precision that the movement's always going to be 10 degrees and 20 degrees equaling 30 degrees, they're all going to be equally spaced. And so if one is off, the next retrograde loop is going to be off too as well. And in our Shiloh booklet, we emphasize this concept of how this celestial sign, the looping that is taking place in Leo and Virgo, will not be repeated, how it's landing specifically at the hind leg and at the pregnancy cycle in Virgo. This is not going to be happening again for hundreds and hundreds of years. This is a very, very unique sign happening right now, perfectly circling the hind leg and also exactly in the perfect pregnancy rehearsal spot. And so the way it's laid out and being divided this year should definitely catch our attention because it lines up exactly with the understanding of the Shiloh prophecy and the Revelation 12 Shiloh prophecy too as well. Now this is 2016 when we are anticipating the second time. So what if we backed all the way up to the first time? How would the division appear at the first time? Well, using just the same map for comparison, the retrograde loop back at the time of Christ's birth circled Regulus. And this is what the wise men saw. This is what caught their attention. This is really part of the true Star of Bethlehem. The Star of Bethlehem was really a choreography of multiple things that caught their attention all together. And it caught their attention that the time that they were expecting the Messiah to be born, at the appropriate time that he would then have time to grow up and then enter Jerusalem at the prophesied Daniel time, when they were looking and expecting him, they saw the scepter circle Regulus, which is the king's star, even in the Chaldean perspective. And so that really caught their attention, made them sit up. Wow, the scepter is circling the king star. This means the Messiah is being born. This is why they got so excited. This was not a celestial event that happened every day. It was totally unique because they understood the way Jupiter's retrograde movement creeped along in the sky every 12 years. They knew the timing was not accidental. And keep in mind, they observed this over time. They would see that retrograde movement. And so this is one of the reasons why they were late to showing up after he was born, is because it took them a while to observe the signs of his birth. So they saw the retrograde movement circling the king star, and then that told them the division for the Judah section, which almost encompassed the entire Leo at that time too as well. And again, even at that time, spillover just because of the 30 degrees only covers so much in the arc of the sky. But this is what they saw. The king star in Leo being circled right at the time they were expecting to see the celestial sign of the Sceptre star. They saw the Sceptre star circle the king star. That's what sent them through the roof. And now we have seen here in the last generation, when we are expecting him to see the scepter, the same SHILOH scepter, circle the hind foot and section out the hind portion of the prophecy, has sent us through the roof too as well. This is not accidental. The more we understand the precise clockwork motion of the heaven and how rare this lineup is, the more excited we get of seeing this is not accidental. This lines up exactly with what they saw the first time, and it's lining up with the prophetic expectation we had of knowing we are in the ballpark of the last generation, and we were expecting to see the celestial signs that our redemption is drawing nigh. And we had also recently covered the story of Isaiah and Hezekiah with the sundial, and how the sun went retrograde, and that measured out the 10 degrees difference on the step sundial that they had there. We don't know the exact measurement, just that it was 10 units. But we also noticed how that wonder that happened caught the Chaldeans' attention in Babylon. They came down wondering, what are you doing with the sun? What's going on? We heard it had something to do with you. So we see this connection with retrograde movement, 10 units, the Chaldeans, Babylon, prophecy. And then we learned that this event led to the prophecy of the group that would go to Babylon, which included Daniel, who would become the chief Chaldean, the astronomer, who would learn about this type of retrograde movement that defines 10 degrees of arc in the sky. Incredible connections that we're seeing that the Lord is drawing our attention to and giving us wisdom about, and seeing come into application as we try to understand the first time and the second time. In Daniel prophesied of the first coming of Messiah to the day when he would enter to Jerusalem. And so the wise men just did the back math to figure out when he would be born based off of that date. And so they looked at that time looking for the star. And based on their astronomical perspective and how they saw the scepter sectioning out the sky and circling Regulus and right at the expected time, that's what got them on their camels and got them heading to Jerusalem, even though there was a lot that they did not know. They said, we know this is happening. We're going to go and find out a lot more. And they found out a lot more, and they found the king. But let's keep in mind, what they saw was the retrograde circling of Regulus, the king star, in Leo. But then how it fell out that year, the next retrograde, following that, starting the next 30 degrees, started right near the beginning of Virgo, right near the woman, which would span out the 30 degrees of the pregnancy in her torso area. So it, again, not only perfectly highlighted the division for Judah, it also perfectly sectioned out the division for the woman too as well, back at Christ's first coming, which was also the time of when he paid the redemption for us and fulfilled the Day of Atonement. And then the next retrograde happened past the pregnancy portion, just past it, which would mark the start of the next constellation division. And that's how it happened at the time of Christ's first coming. And we are expecting him the second time to pick up what he has already redeemed. We're just waiting for him to pick up his purchased possession. And it's caught our attention that the first time it circled and signaled that the king was coming, he's not coming as the king and not coming to stay right now. We're expecting him to just come real quickly for a visit and pick up what he's purchased and then go home. So, in light of the SHILOH prophecy dealing with the hind foot, it has caught our attention that this time around, it's not circling Regulus, it's circling the hind portion of the same prophecy, the hind foot of it. And then it's going to lead directly into the sign that's going to signal the return of the one who already came the first time, the return of the Son of Man. Just like John the Baptist warned 3.5 years in advance to prepare the way, now a celestial sign is warning that he's going to be coming in 3.5 years too as well, another messenger type. And the retrograde is landing exactly in the pregnancy cycle area, rehearsing what has already happened and warning of who is coming back. And as we look for Christ the second time, we are reminded of the wise men and how they went forward in faith. Even though there were some important things that they did not know, they still went forward anyway, acting in faith. And likewise we are reminded that we are called to be wise virgins too as well, the ready bride of Christ. And when we hear the call, when we see the signs, when we know our redemption draweth nigh, we should be rising up. Even though there are things we do not know, we should be going out anyway, looking for our bridegroom. Where is the King? Where is the King? Where is my bridegroom? Where is my beloved? Where is my Redeemer? Are we rising up? Are we living and acting wisely at this time? We are told we won't know the day or hour, but we're told to watch anyway. And it just reminded me that what tells us the days and hour? The sun, and also tells us the hours. And that definitely reminds us of what we've seen recently with the Hezekiah and Isaiah too as well. And since we don't know the day or hour, we shouldn't be looking for those, but we can see with the prophetic examples that we can learn from that exact same celestial sign, the retrograde movement, and the specific connected measurement that goes with that movement too, and that was recorded. And again, it should catch our attention that in the Isaiah and Hezekiah example of that celestial sign, God is the one who picked the 10-degree measurement. Not man, not Isaiah, not Hezekiah. God picked that number and that retrograde measurement very deliberately. And for the astronomers, the Chaldeans, it caught their attention how many degrees it was. Which reminds us of Jupiter the Sceptre, which also has a retrograde movement, which also measures out 10 degrees of arc in the sky. So we won't know the day or hour, but that also tells us, and hints in a sense of what celestial sign, what celestial light in the heaven we should be looking for as the sign. We already know the sign is the scepter. We already know Jupiter is the scepter. But it also further emphasizes the importance of how the scepter divides out 10 degrees and 30 degrees and the divisions along the ecliptic. Now, Jupiter is the scepter. But what else is it? It's the scepter and it's the lawgiver. A lawgiver is the one who sets out laws and makes declarations and determinations. And so it should not surprise us at all that we learn that Jupiter, the scepter, determines and declares the divisions of the constellations. Not just from a Chaldean perspective, but also from a biblical prophetic perspective. The scepter, the lawgiver, is the judge who determines the divisions of the constellations. Isaiah 33:22, for the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king, he will save us. The king is also the judge. The king is also the lawgiver. And this is even an ancient concept. In Egypt, for example, they had the royal Egyptian cubit. The king was the lawgiver who determined measurements even too as well. And we've talked about how the king is the judge. He was the top judge. Appeals could be made to the king as the top judge. Paul took example of that. Very common for the kings to be the highest judge in the land because they were the lawgiver. They were the highest court you could go, was to the king. The king was the lawgiver, and he also set out royal measurements too as well. So this is amazing just to consider how Jupiter is the scepter, but it is also the lawgiver. So let's compare this first coming and the second coming again, and we'll see even more amazing things. The first time Christ came, the scepter, the lawgiver, circled Regulus, the king star, and then went on to circle and declare the woman portion, the vision for the woman. And then the next retrograde happened shortly after the pregnancy section. And as we try to have an understanding of the second time, we study the first time. And when we look at the second time and what we see unfolding around us and have the expectation that this is the time and the signs, everything that's been drawing our attention, when we compare the two, we find some amazing connections. With the Leo the lion, again, we've noticed how it circled the hind leg, drawing attention to the hind portion of the prophecy. And Jacob even told Judah that Shiloh prophecy was for the last days. This is where we are right now. We know it extends into the tribulation and millennium time too as well. But for the Lion of the tribe of Judah, we know he's going to be gathering his people in connection with the hind portion of that particular section of the prophecy. And this is the portion we see circled and emphasized for us. And it's that retrograde at that point that defines the next prophetic division. And so from that retrograde point on will be Judah this time around. And that's how we should consider it. And then we see the next 30 degrees lands at having the retrograde right at the pregnancy cycle spot, which is rehearsing the coming of the Son of Man, warning that he is coming again in 3.5 years. Prepare ye the way. So the first time the lawgiver declared the section of Judah in that area right there. And so that's how the wise men would have viewed that section is Judah. That section is prophetically Judah. Irregardless of the stars, that section is Judah. Then the next section was the woman. Again, irregardless of how stars fell outside of that section was the woman. And then now here in our time, the retrograde on the hind foot defined and declared the section for Judah. Prophetically, that section is divided as Judah. That is Judah right there. The next section then is the woman. And it should catch our attention how closely it lines up to the first time of Christ's coming, but with an offset, because it is not going to be exactly the same. It is going to be slightly later on in the prophecies concerning the promised Redeemer. We should expect the offset, but it should not surprise us that they are so close either. Now, we are about right here. That's where Jupiter is, the scepter, the lawgiver. It is still in the Judah section that the lawgiver defined. And so as long as it is in that section, it is in the area that the lawgiver has defined, Judah. But it has caught my attention that on September 23rd, 2017, it's going to be approximately there, shortly after the pregnancy birthing. Which, when you compare the two from the first coming and the second coming, it is literally picking up where it ended the first time. Think about that. Look at that. The first coming, the section of the woman, how Christ came and was born, the woman portion of the prophecy was fulfilled. And here we come full circle to the second time, and the prophecy of the same promised seed of the woman, the promised Redeemer who would be born of a woman, it's picking up right at that exact spot where it left off at when he came to be a light to the Gentiles. Picking up at the right same area. This is very deliberate celestial movements. And then it also caught my attention that both of these times, the first coming and the second time, the Judah section both times included the feet, both of the feet. Keeping in mind that Zavijava, from the Chaldean perspective, is the rear foot of the lion. And so the first time it included this rear foot, and here it is the second time, also including that in the middle too as well, but circling the more prominent leg that we were familiar with at first, and that caused us to rise up and investigate a lot more too. But when we stop and consider the precise celestial movements, and then how prophetically even the celestial sign is picking up at the exact same spot, this is amazing. This is so amazing. Is it affecting how we live? Is it affecting how we live in light of eternity, and that our redemption is nigh even at the doors? The scepter is in the Judah portion. We've talked about how even the enemy knows this time and this portion, and even allusions to the division type. They know what time it is. They know Shiloh is about to gather his people. They also know that sudden destruction is about to come too as well, and that we are in the days of Noah and Lot right now. What are we doing? Are we living wisely? Are we rising up? Are we shining bright? When we know the time, it should affect how we live. We should be rising up. We should be casting off the works of darkness and putting on the armor of light. There's a lot we do not know, but we have heard the lion roar. We have heard the bridegroom cometh. Go ye out to meet him. So let us rise up. Let us trim our lamps. Let us shine bright. Let us put on the armor of light and go forth to meet our Redeemer, our bridegroom, our beloved, serving him first and highest above all else. Maranatha.